Okay, so welcome to District 3 Spring Community Conversation. It is Lopez always seems to go last, and you guys get the best crowd, so we appreciate you and your patience for the third week. Tonight's format will be similar to previous years. Lincoln, our director, Lincoln Borman, will give a presentation, and today we've got myth busting as our topic du jour, and then we'll move into preserve update from Amanda Wiedau, our illustrious Lopez Island Preserve steward, and open it to questions. And if there are, we've discovered that sometimes questions come up after Lincoln's presentation, so we'll open it up then. And I'll monitor online in the chat, or feel free to push the button at the bottom that says reactions and put the raise your hand. It'll bring you to the top and I can call on you that way. And I think we'll have, I'm not sure how they sorted it in the room, but maybe Krista and or Peggy or Amanda will field questions together. So it might get a little nutty, but I think we can handle it. And that's pretty much housekeeping. I'll continue to let people in. And Lincoln, I will turn it over to you.
All right, well, thanks, Tanya. Thank you all for joining us. So I'm going to share my screen to get going here. Okay, so we'd like to start with the land acknowledgement that we reside on and care for the ancestral lands and waters of the Coast Salish people who have stewarded and called this place home since time immemorial. And let us honor inherent Aboriginal and treaty rights that have been passed down from generation to generation. So this is our spring meeting for Lopez, and we're going to talk a little bit about facts and go on to the fun part, the preserve part. But I'm going to start with the first one. So this is our mission, which I think most people are familiar with, despite the fact that it is really, really long and has a lot of stuff in it. But you can break it down to a few basic ideas. One is that we are focused on preserving ecosystem integrity, making sure that nature continues to function as it should. Also, rural character and landscapes, trying to preserve the way this place has looked for generations. Community health is a big one, and certainly getting people outside is a really important piece of that. And finally, agricultural sustainability. So with that, I'm just going to jump right into some of the topics we're going to cover tonight. So heard on the street, critical comments. I think you all recognize that room there, and that was one of the meetings for the Kluwer acquisition, but let's go on. So here's one of the things that we hear. Doesn't the land bank already own half the county? Well, no, we don't. We are proud of the fact that we have accomplished what we have, and that we have 39 preserves with 29 open to the public, which is about 74%. And 49 conservation easements on 7 islands. So there's quite a lot, but the total of our ownership is only 4.5%. So quite short of the half the county that seems to go around in the rumor mill. Just to break it down, the county acreage by use, so people are clear, and this comes from the assessor's office. So 83% of the county is privately owned, with only 17% in public ownership. You can see the land bank in there at about 5,000 acres and other public conservation lands. The other piece of that is other public lands like schools and things like that. So the overwhelming majority of the county is privately owned. Taking land off the tax rolls and creating higher taxes. Well, let's go through that one. I think the context is really important here. When you think about the total value of real estate, the total taxable value of real estate as assessed is just under 12.5 billion. So you can see these bills here, they're in $60 million increments. That's 12.5 billion. The 60 million represents what we've got. That's the total taxable value of land bank preserves. You might think it should be higher, but the reality is 75% of the properties that we buy are in lower taxed designations, including designated forest land where people are paying pennies on the dollar. So while we have a fair amount of acreage, the taxable value tends to be low. And that 60 million is less than 1/2 of 1% of the total. So if you look at it a different way, and you were to think about selling land bank reserves to private buyers, selling it all off, what would that mean? If you kept tax receipts the same for a $750,000 property, you might save $15 a year. But on the other hand, there is a real bump if you own property near public lands or especially natural areas. And those private properties would be devalued if you converted all preserves back to private use. So you'd lose that value, probably canceling out the $15. So it's pretty minimal. San Juan County does have the lowest tax rate in the state by far. And just out this year, that rate is at $5.86 per thousand. So for a $750,000 house or property, you might pay $4,400 a year. But if you lived in Island County, that same value house would cost you $5,400 a year, or in Whitman, $8,400 a year. So we are lower than everybody else and quite a bit, honestly. Does conservation increase property taxes? Well, actually, no. And what this table shows, even though we're the outlier on the table, on that vertical axis, you can see property tax rates. And on the horizontal axis at the bottom, you can see the percentage of land in private ownership. And what you're seeing here is a regression line. And it shows that actually the more private ownership you have, the higher your taxes tend to be. Again, we're an outlier on this, but other counties fit that pattern. Why? Well, realistically, development rarely pays for itself. In almost every case, the cost of services required for new development outstrips any increased revenue from taxes. So taxes go up as more land is developed. And there have been literally hundreds of studies around the country which show the same thing. Okay, another one. This was one I really got a kick out of. The land bank takes 15% off the top of every sale. No, that's not true. We have 1%, which is paid by the buyer. And if you look at 2022, nearly 70% of the REIT revenue that we earned or took in was on sales exceeding $1 million. And this is the other data from 2022, looking at the number of sales in the different categories. So quite a lot coming from that top level, that top tier, and not so much from the lower tiers. The land bank is making it impossible to find affordable housing. Well, that's an interesting one. And I would have to say no again, and why? So there are roughly 11,000 vacant parcels in the county, as opposed to 9,400 plus parcels that are actually occupied with residences. And you could divide some of those parcels again, creating another 7,200. So there are quite a lot of parcels and would-be parcels out there that could be developed. We're really only a third of the way to the build out. And also, county council can increase density in urban growth areas and through rural cluster development beyond that. Town of Friday Harbor can increase density within its boundaries and annex neighboring parcels. And when we do acquisitions, most of them or the overwhelming majority of them are in rural or wild areas, not in higher density areas. And lastly, the affordable housing REIT legislation requires a county to have a fully funded land bank REIT. So in order to collect the affordable housing real estate excise tax that was passed by the voters, you have to have that land bank REIT. That's state law. So why do we have lack of affordable housing? I'm sure everyone has their own ideas about this, but the reality is the cost of construction out here is extremely high. When property is on the market, there is a lot of competition from external buyers, but lack of apartments and year-round rentals. Our wages are generally poor in this county. It's a real problem. But the county is doing a lot to promote affordable housing. Again, there's the affordable housing REIT. There are local nonprofit organizations that are working really hard on this issue. There are potential funds from the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee. And also, most recently, the county's purchase of the Argyle lots, which is now proceeding to be developed by the San Juan Community Home Trust for affordable housing. Another question, do we spend money wisely? So here are a couple of ways to measure that. One, our administrative costs are low. We're obligated to stay under 10% through the life of the program. Our administrative costs have been less than 5% of revenue. So we've done quite well in that regard. When we're doing acquisitions, we work extremely hard to find other revenue sources, other partners, whether they're nonprofit partners or government grants, to help with acquisitions. And we've done really well in that regard too, getting more than a one-to-one return. So stretching those REIT dollars as far as we can possibly stretch them. We've also set aside money for stewardship with $5 million more or less in that account. So I think we're doing quite well in this regard. When is enough enough? Another interesting question. Well, what does this mean? There are a few ways to look at it. One, what do people want? And we know from surveys that both community members and visitors favor more land acquisition for conservation. For climate change resilience, scientists are recommending 30% of landscapes be conserved, and San Juan County has 19%, including nonprofit owners. So we're short in that regard. And again, there are roughly between 11,000 current and 7,200 potential undeveloped parcels in the county. And in our real estate market, amenity value is the key. Our primary amenity is the natural environment with opportunities for passive recreation. And last, there's a strong community desire for more trails of all kinds. When you look at how much public land there is in Western Washington counties, you can see that we actually rank last, and we are quite a bit behind a number of other counties. So 17%, that's what we have in public ownership, as opposed to Skagit, which is 62, Whatcom is 68%, even King County is 46%. Island County is just ahead of us, but we're still last in this regard. So quite a bit of room for improvement, honestly. This is just the cover and a table from a survey that we had done back in 2019. And this is where we surveyed all island residents and came up with what's really important to them if we think about this question of how to manage tourism and visitors. And so you can see that ideas like creating separated bike paths, bicycle lanes, really important. Off-road trails, something also important, as well as acquisition of both shoreline and forest or mountain properties. When we're thinking about this question of climate resilience, we're dependent on analyses that have been done by other organizations really across the country to figure out, well, what kind of landscape is going to resist climate change. We know climate is changing, and for us, what that means is typically wetter winters and hotter, drier summers. And so what areas are going to be most resistant to those changes? What areas do we really need to focus on conserving? And this is what it looks like. So you can see in some cases we've done quite well. The upper part of this slide over to the right a little bit on Orcas, that's Moran State Park, largely conserved, but other parts of Orcas, not so well. Also in San Juan, we've got a big area in the center part of the island in the northern part, and we've only conserved a portion of all of that. And even on Lopez, you know, we don't have any deep blue there, but that green is awfully important. And you can see there's a lot of it that has not been conserved. So a lot of work to do if we're really going to try and maintain resilient landscapes going forward. This is just a slide I put together to show really what can happen, because I think people tend to be fairly complacent. They have a certain routine, they drive a certain way, they're used to seeing the landscape look a certain way, and they assume it's going to be that way forever. Well, not really. So here's just a random place on San Juan Island with the existing situation. So there are a number of parcels here with 90 residences total, but you could have this where it goes up to 230 residences. And this is what could be the reality without conservation. So it's important for people to know that what they see is not always what they're going to be seeing going into the future. The land bank has way too much money. Well, what we do with that money is purchase property. And the large tracts that we focus on, typically with all of these amenities for the public, come at a steep price. So although our REIT revenues have gone up significantly, the prices of real estate also have. So we're subject to that as well. And it really balances out. We're also still paying on loans for property purchased, including Turtleback, North Shore and Orcas, Katy Mountain on San Juan. 7.74 million is still owed. We have been able to leverage our funds by securing a lot of money from outside the county and from partners, which enables our tax dollars to go twice as far. So we continue to work on that. And also, lastly, stewardship costs have increased pretty dramatically, really, as we open more preserves to the public and manage wider areas for ecological health and reducing fire risk. In 2023, our stewardship costs are budgeted at 42% of the total budget, quite a lot more than they have been in the past. So, is the land bank still relevant? Well, here's the real situation that we're facing in Washington State, that the state is projecting population to increase from 8 million to 9 in 2037 to 10 in 2050, almost all of which will come from migration. The county's population increased by nearly 5% just between 2020 and 2022. If San Juan County were built out, there could be 50 to 60,000 people living here as permanent residents, with possibly double that seasonally. And what we're looking at really is a record pace of development. It's at an all-time high, with last year 700 stormwater permits being issued, 1,200 building permits, and 405 new buildings constructed with a value of 130 million. We're really in a critical race to direct growth away from sensitive areas, and we're losing special places at a rapid rate. Farmland, forests, shorelines, iconic landscapes are all threatened. The land bank is the only tool the county has to save all of these. So with that, I will stop and I will take whatever questions people might have. Then we'll go on with the program.
So I don't see any in the chat or any hands raised. Oh, wait. A good job, Lincoln. You got a good job. Do you have any hands up in the room at the Family Resource Center? You want to unmute and
this is for Lincoln. On the resiliency map that you showed for climate resiliency, could you give us a bit more on that as to why the higher mountains, why the forests, and why other areas such as fresh water supply? Give us just another little bit more in depth as to Land Bank's definition of climate resiliency.
Sure, we're really depending on other organizations who've defined that term from an ecological perspective. And so what it means in general, the criteria that go into that measure, one of them is topography, for the simple reason that as you go up in altitude, temperature goes down as you change aspect. So go from a south-facing slope to a north-facing slope. The conditions are quite different, and the hope is that as temperatures warm, species can actually migrate, and so that topography is really important. Also, contiguous protected areas are really important. So those are two of the really critical factors that go into that measure. And there are a lot of other ones too. That's a topic all to its own. We could easily spend an hour or two on that one, but I'll leave you with that for now.
That definitely answers my question. Thank you. Nobody else here.
well, then I guess it's Amanda's turn. So I apologize. I did not introduce our commissioners, our District 3 Lopez commissioners. So if you don't know them already, Peggy, Bill, if you could wave your hand and talk to the owl.
Hi. I don't know if you can see me on the owl, but hi.
Pop over. We'll have to talk to that owl. And then Krista Campbell, who is our chair this year as well. If you would please give a wave and talk to the owl.
Hi to the owl.
Did it pick you up? I know, I don't know. We were waving arms earlier and hoping to get.
That's the owl.
Oh,
there we go. You got it. There we go.
Thank you. And then Amanda Wiedau, who is our Lopez Island Preserve Steward. You'll see momentarily, she's going to take over with the Preserve Update.
And Sarah.
Hi. Sarah DeRoy, seasonal field. Hi. Oh yeah. I don't know if the owl can see me, but
Yeah, look, there's the owl there. Oh,
hi owl. Hi everyone.
Oh, Sarah, I didn't know you were there. My apologies. Yay, thank you.
Good. Yeah, I'm back for my second season working with Amanda and could not be more proud. We're getting a lot done. Okay. Tanya, how does that look on your end?
We don't have it on our screen.
Okay, let's try again. How about I share the screen?
Perfect. There we go.
Big slide? Good?
Perfect.
You can see the show? Okay, great. I'm gonna look at you. Well, I'll just say thanks for coming out tonight. Most of you I've met. I'm Amanda Wiedau. I'm the Lopez Preserve Steward. And I'll be talking about, I'll give the stewardship update for Lopez, and we are going to talk about the Watmau addition specifically. So just really quick, this is the land bank map for Lopez. The gold is our conservation easements, so those are on private property. And then the green is all of the preserves, and so that is where I work. Sarah and I are taking care of all those properties with help from volunteers and some staff from other islands. So we're going to talk about the Watmau addition, and I think some of you have been on the tours. I know a lot of you are familiar with the property. Yes. So, you know, and you also probably call it by different names, but for right now, I'm calling it the Watmau addition. And naming is also kind of a piece when we get a new property. But this is 11.5 acres on the southwest tip of Watmau Bay. We bought it last year. And so aside from its obvious scenic qualities, it has significant ecological and cultural significance, and as well as the historic value. It has Samson Chadwick Cabin, which might be the oldest house on Lopez, but I still would like to confirm that before I say it is. So we've been interested in this property for a long time, and last year we were able to make it happen. Okay, so if you want to look at the landscape context, the property is in yellow and the map on the left. And then other properties that the land bank owns are in the lighter yellow, and then the BLM properties are in that kind of that green. So there's a lot of connectivity in the landscape, and there's also a few properties that have conservation easements on them, bordering the new acquisition. And so it has about 2,000 feet of shoreline. So there's 2 pocket beaches, and so acquiring this piece actually created over 1.5 miles of protected shoreline. There's about 450 acres in total for that Chadwick Watmau Colville complex. Something I like about the picture on the right, that aerial, you can see this bull kelp forest just off of the shore, which is pretty significant. And that was also the site of Coast Salish reef net fishery. You know, we use, in the land bank world, we use the term REIT a lot. It's the real estate excise tax. It's a voter approved 1% tax on sales of property in San Juan County that the buyer pays. And so we have that pool of money that we use when we're buying property. Next question.
What does REIT stand for?
Yeah, real estate excise tax. I know a lot of acronyms, and I think I put most of them up there except for that one.
Yes, I know BLM is.
Yeah. Well, it means a couple of things.
All right, thank you.
So it's $2.5 million to buy this property. And we had been looking at certain avenues when we were acquiring it for funding partners or even a conservation easement. And we just had to act quickly to secure the property, to protect it. And so we're still exploring these 2 paths of how we can recoup some of the funding costs. And so one of that is we've submitted 2 grant applications to different state funding sources. And so we've been ranked through that process. And so we could receive up to $1.5 million if we go that route. The second, we have been discussing with the Bureau of Land Management that they would be the owners of it, and they are still interested. And so they can access other funding sources And then we would go through a process for the land bank to resell property is kind of guided by state and local ordinances. So it would have to be at appraised value to resell it to them. So this is, it's still on the table and this will be discussed this year. We will really be determining which of these paths we're gonna take.
Question. Is the Bureau of Land Management own the Watmouth or the mountain?
Chadwick?
Yeah, Chadwick Mountain and also Coville. Is that BLM?
Yeah, so,
Okay, so there would be a continuance of land ownership.
yeah, so I'm just gonna say it again in case the owl didn't pick you up. There's a question if BLM also owned Chadwick and Colville.
Yes.
Yeah, so that,
I used to call it Mertz Mountain.
yes. Yeah, so they, I would say, I guess, own the majority of the public lands.
Yes,
down
that's what
there.
I had that understanding.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So when we acquire property, we create a stewardship and management plan. And at this point, we created what we call an interim management plan. So that is gonna be like a 3-year plan. Typically, we make stewardship plans for 10 years. And we just weren't really ready to make some of those longer term decisions. And so we have a copy of this here and it's also online. But you can see there's just a lot of different elements to consider in the plan. And so the first one is kind of touching on that funding source, which we're still discussing. And then working through some assessments. So we did an ecological assessment. I can talk more about that. Doing a cultural and historic resource assessment, working through other infrastructure and some safety or hazards, talking to stakeholders, that's all of you, that's getting public input, like what does the future management of this site look like? We're still exploring having a caretaker on the site, so the plan kind of outlines that is a possibility. And then during this interim period, it will be closed to public access while we're looking at all of these other elements. And we know that people really want to go there, and so we have been doing guided walks. I've done about a dozen of those. That top right picture is one of those tours. So that's a chance for people to come and see the property and talk about these things, be informed, give public input. And you can also volunteer if you want to come out and do some work there. What property maintenance? So here's some landscape sites, landscape photos. You can see we've just got quite the diversity with the shoreline. The different pocket beaches have significance with the substrate is suitable for forage fish spawning. So I spent a bit of time this winter sampling for that. I actually scoop up sand, send it to a lab, and they look for fishing. And that was a part of a countywide project. We didn't actually find eggs on this site, but Watmouth Bay we know is significant for forage fish and juvenile salmon. So it's all connected. And then other parts of the landscape, it's probably typically coastal prairie, kind of like maybe Iceberg or Colville. And then we have some kind of transition with some shrubs, and that bottom left picture is an orchard, some really old, probably 100-year-old heritage orchard trees. And you can see the house in the distance. So we did an ecological assessment last year. Well, Quiot did it. And so this, I just kind of pulled this right out of their report so you can see some of the great photos. But they were tasked with really documenting what is there, flora, fauna, anything requiring special management considerations, and then recommendations.
I can tell you what kind of apples these were. Oh,
What do we have there? Oh, unidentified.
Rhode Island greens.
Okay.
It's the only kind that was left when the guy came that was selling apple trees way back. Almost every tree was Rhode Island green.
So online, Becky has said that those apples are Rhode Island greening.
Mhm. It's an old, an old.
So as, when we also, the ecological assessment also did some mapping, what are the vegetation communities? And that is typically like what we do when we get a property. Now this one is, a little different because people have lived there for a really long time. And so, these patches of, maybe what was coastal prairie, are pretty reduced, and there's, well, they actually use the term exceedingly weedy. And so this is the next slide I put in there because it just kind of represents some of the challenges and, again, opportunities that we would face with managing vegetation there. The blue and the kind of pinkish are all the non-native, primarily non-native now. And so the green is kind of those remnant coastal prairie patches that we could really focus on expanding. And then the brown is more the like Douglas fir and Nootka rose. Here's some wildlife images from that. So just really thorough documentation of plants and animals on the site. There was also 9 species of bats, all that were present in the island. So we had some like sound recorders up there.
That's a deer that's under the apple tree.
Yeah, not surprising there. There's a deer in the orchard. Okay.
Oh my.
So
That's so beautiful.
the human history of the San Juans, Coach Salish people. They gathered and they lived here. They harvested, they fished, and they collected clams, and they managed the landscape for food and medicine. So
I do believe there were fish traps, way back. I don't know exactly where they
in
were. Maybe Nancy knows.
Boulder, between a reef net between the property and Boulder Island.
Yeah.
So I pulled this. This is a screenshot. If you actually look up Coast Salish place names of the San Juan Islands, this is, this site was significant, and there are shell middens on the site. So the interim management plan, and what we're moving towards is just to initiate communication and have some dialogue about with tribes about the importance of this site and how it could be managed.
Well, there are quite a few burial grounds
Mhm.
in the
In the
area.
area.
Yeah.
Bill Holm, who was our neighbor, identified some, and I think that the University of Washington found also, and it was a lot of middens, all three. So those are all significant.
Yeah.
So are you saying the burial grounds are on Wahoo?
Some are.
I don't know of any on the
Oh,
Hume property,
yeah.
but on the hill above it, and I know one around the shoreline. Others have become harder to identify as they've grown older, but there's some very distinct ones.
So many artifacts
Mhm.
and shell ground. Because I think it's the Sandwich tribe or the Sandwich, I don't know which one.
So I know that the Sanish were
Yes.
part of it,
Yeah.
but the Sanish and Samish are just
Mhm.
divided
And
by
they-
the
They
boundary.
camp there every summer because they have their fish traps. And so the ground on Watnall Head is just filled with shells.
So where are the shells coming from? Because,
Well, I think they must have gone to Mud Bay.
Mud Bay,
They're
it's my
clams.
guess.
There's not a lot
okay,
of
yeah,
them.
because there were no
There's
shells.
nothing out there, yeah.
Right, that's, I just saw some, I was curious, yeah. That's a long ways to bring them.
Yeah, there's some shell,
I've
there's
seen
some
them.
clams. Yeah, horse plants, maybe some, you know.
I have a few more slides, and we can talk more about this.
Cause you can go to the store and get, you know.
Does that actually play?
Oh, sorry, this does not play. I'm
Oh.
sorry, it was a screenshot. But yes, you can go online and, we're here to say that, yes.
Nice.
So the house, Becky's here and, it's very sweet to see her smile. So this is, house built by Samson Chadwick, was in 1876. And, you know, going back to the slide before, the reports are when Samson arrived, there were fish drying racks on this property.
And Samson Chadwick actually, I think, deserted from the Confederate Army.
He was
Went as far north as he could get. And there's even a musket there, I mean, in years past, of course, it was taken.
I think the Historic Museum has it. So Chadwick married Adelia Bradshaw from the Squam tribe near Port Townsend. And they lived on this property. They had 6 children, 4 survived to adulthood. They raised sheep and planted the orchard. The Historic Museum has like a pretty good sized folder of the Chadwick family.
Nancy.
Yeah, Nancy's here. You know, their descendants lived in the house almost 100 years until the 70s. So some of you might have known them. I know Brent told you did. And then, so there's a long history there, and there's many buildings still standing. There's about 6. And certainly when I do the tours, the most common burning question people have is, what are we going to do with the house? And I think that I would say it depends. In this interim period, we're still assessing the house, and even though it's been lived in continuously and cared for, it needs a lot of work. And so moving forward, you know, learning what we can about what kind of work it needs. It needs a foundation, it needs lead paint remediation, electrical system, the bathroom maintenance or bathroom repairs. And so we really are interested in public input, like what is the future? What does the community see as like the desired goal for the house? And then assessing like what kind of resources we would have through partnerships or volunteers or funding to make that happen. So when I think of, you know, there's a spectrum. Right now, the house is there, we're not changing anything, but on one end, it's like the house goes away. On the other end, it gets restored. And so we just need to know, we need to know more. And so I have had a few people look at it. And my next slide. It's a very technical term. It's a little funky. These are some of the things that would need some work. So again, you know, we're interested in hearing people's thoughts, like what's the long-term vision.
Just be in that house during a nor'easter, it's really
Yeah.
exciting.
Can't see the 2 rooms from these pictures. Can you?
I think we might be able to
It's
do
a
this.
3-bedroom home, I just want you to know that.
Okay, so I think I have one more slide. So this is some of the site work we've done, just work on the land. In the left side, we have a before and after picture. So there's what I would call the overgrown orchard. And then below, we have cut out all of the blackberries. And now I call it the cow parsnip orchard, because that is what is coming up underneath. Last summer, we had some work parties to cut bull thistle. Some of you were there. It was great. I think we filled up 3 garbage bags of just thistle flowers. So just really working to contain weeds and not springing them. So if this is calling to you and you want to volunteer, let me know.
I worked on many of those weeds for years.
Yes, they are
I'm sticking with it.
persistent weeds.
Yeah.
So
I
now,
like your still hedge trimmer. That machine and I got along very well.
oh yes. So I think I'm gonna stop sharing the screen and we'll see. We'll see if the Zoom people are still there. Oh, I disconnected from the projector.
I have a question. Accessibility.
Well, we still see you and the Zoom still happens. It looks, Karen, do you have a question? Or are you saying hi?
I think the projector went to sleep.
It looked like, it sounded like you didn't know if the Zoom people were still here, so I just wanted to tell you that we're still here.
Give it a little, is there a blue light? You see a blue light?
I am wondering.
Okay.
I try to,
Well, they lost us.
Press power again to turn it off.
no, I don't want to turn it off. I just want to see.
You want to wake up.
Okay.
Oh, did the owl go to sleep?
No, the owl sleep?
Owl's got its eyes lit up.
Or is it that your camera,
project.
or the, must be the monitor?
Oh,
It's coming back.
Go Apple. Is it Apple K?
Windows.
Pass the cookies back just in case anyone
Oh,
over there
gosh,
wants
yeah.
Okay, so that was the first dual presentation I've done, so live.
Very good.
Thank
You did a
you.
great job.
Thank you.
We'll try to get them back.
Does anyone online
really
have
weird
any
because-
questions for Amanda? While she's
My computer's not.
transitioning?
all set up.
So Tanya, you can see us though?
Yes, yes, but you just can't see us. We have a question online. Do you want me, are you,
Okay, so we disconnected from the owl, but I also don't have, my mouse is now showing up on my screen. Oh, it's on this one. There we go. Okay, we're gonna do it.
Okay,
Meeting owl.
so we're gonna let Tanya get back connected with the Zoom people since we've been had the luxury of making comments while the conversation's going. They have to raise their hand because they're a little more compliant than we are. So I'm gonna let Tanya make sure that we find out if there's,
are you ready for a question,
We'll just make sure we get that kind of included.
Amanda and or Krista? Are you all
Did
ready?
the owl, maybe the owl did go to sleep.
Can they hear us?
I don't know. Can you hear us? Uh-oh.
Yes, we can hear you.
Well, that's great, Jean. I don't know that the people that are live that frozen, this happened earlier when they moved the owl and they had to disconnect and come back. It's basically the owl is a projector and microphone. Owl appears to be working.
Well, it's the picture is up, but it's frozen.
Yeah. So,
So Karen, what's your
maybe
question?
Lincoln can answer. We'll try.
Well, one question I have is whether the house is being, well, you're deciding what to do with the house, is it being, is there upkeep happening to keep it from degrading any further?
Yeah, we're keeping the elements out of it, that's for sure. So that's the main thing we're doing at this point. It's got a lot of issues with the foundation or the lack thereof. So that's, if we were to hold on to it, we'd have to address that and many other concerns. But at this point, it's closed off. Rain's not getting into it, and we're checking it. So if there are issues that arise, we'll correct them.
Great. Well, I haven't been to that property since about 1990 when I went to buy garlic from Becky. But at the time I thought, oh my God, what a spot this is. And this should be like a public park or something. So I'm really thrilled when I heard that the land bank was gonna get the property. And I would be interested in volunteering. I'll have to talk to Amanda about that, because just to be able to be there, even if you're working your tail off, it would be great. So thank you very much for doing that.
Yeah, it doesn't get any better than that, really. It's just such an incredible place. And we knew when we heard it was going on the market that we pretty much had to go all out to get it. So we did.
Yay. Jean, you have a question.
Yeah, can Amanda hear me?
Sorry, everyone.
We
I
don't
don't-
think so.
I don't think so. Amanda, can you, I think they're trying to connect. No sound now is what Krista is texting me. We can see them, but no sound right now.
Okay, well, maybe Lincoln can answer. I wanted to congratulate Amanda and thank her for a really good update on this. We've been following this piece for a long time. Well, not as long as Karen, but almost. And just what a wonderful acquisition, beautiful property. I had a little trouble hearing what Amanda was saying about native place names, tribal engagement. I'm wondering which, if any, of the region's indigenous groups have been contacted in planning how the property is going to be used.
Yeah, we've sent out letters to, I can't remember the total number, but I think it was something like 7 or 8 different tribes who we think may have some relationship to it. It's really hard to tell. I mean, the Samish seem to have the predominant placement here. I'm struggling for the right word to use, honestly, but the major claim. But obviously, other tribes are important in all of this, and there's a lot of interconnection. So we've reached out to everybody that we can think of at this point.
Great, thank you.
It sounds like the room can hear us now. So, Marianne, if you want to ask your question, maybe Amanda will be able to answer, or we'll default to Lincoln again.
Well, I just want to make a comment and that earlier this year, we had an opportunity to go on one of the field trips out there and had an opportunity to go in the house. And I would just like to say that that house is a treasure. And whatever you can do to preserve the house, I'm all in favor of that. It is in such a wonderful place, and inside, I know it needs a lot of work, but boy, what a treasure if you can somehow preserve it. I'm all for that.
Great, thank you for sharing your comment and joining us tonight.
I think we have a number of questions here, I'm guessing.
I think it looks like we're good online if you want to take over live. Going live to Lopez Island.
I know you have questions. Anybody else want to, just going around the room? We'll come back. No. Nancy McCoy has a question.
I'm interested in the preservation of the home and was involved with the Fort Stanley School restoration, a building that had been vacant for 60 years, wide open, no doors left, ridge sagging, north wall flopping loose from the rafters. And we brought it back with building salvage. And I think that I urge you to consider that avenue when, if you choose to preserve the house. There are elements, a few elements in the house, you know, the windows, the homemade doors, some of the hardware that should be saved and protected. And I'd be very happy to volunteer in any aspect in that degree.
Square nails.
Krista?
Yeah, and I think there is some funding that could be available.
Maria Miller has a question.
Yes, what is access contemplated for this property? I've been there quite a bit, but over the years, but the access to it, if we're talking about opening it up at all to the public, what are we talking about?
Yeah, so our plans,
Road, for
I'm
instance.
surprised. So our plan right now is to connect it to the existing trail network by foot. So if you parked at Watmow and used the outhouse and you went on a hike, you could just walk there. And that's the plan currently.
Even, I mean, I understand that, but I just want to say there's no parking at Watmow anymore.
That is an issue, you're right.
I have a question.
Mhm.
So the original driveway that we have always used is no longer, you can no longer drive down there, and there's a gate that's locked now. I haven't been down there, I haven't driven down there for a long time.
There's no locked gate. The gate is, you just open and close it as you come in and
Well, I
out.
mean, I'm thinking of Henderson's, you know, the old Henderson.
Yeah, right there.
So
There's
you
no
can
lock
go-
on it.
Oh, there's, oh, good.
Yeah.
It's just
So
a
good.
discouragement, because it's all private homes down there.
Yeah.
And so,
Oh, I see.
yeah, it actually, I think it was, one of the neighbors that put it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
it's not locked, but it's
It's
just
been
a,
there for years and years and years.
yeah,
It's
not
just
just
that-
that, it's just a beautiful gate.
Oh, it's a different gate, okay.
Yeah, it's a different.
I just wondered,
Mhm.
because there are some people who cannot walk that far, you know, like from Walmart to there. You know, I don't know, it's gonna be public, it's gonna have to be accessible. Yeah,
It doesn't actually have to be accessible.
it doesn't,
We have some that, I'm not saying it won't be, but just because it's been purchased by the land bank, we have preserves that don't have public access or have limited for research and whatever.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
just because it is owned now by the land bank doesn't mean a property would necessarily automatically become.
handicapped accessible.
Right, but so
Yeah.
we don't know yet with this property, but like Mount Grant, it's open one day a month for people to be driven to the top so people can have access. I don't know if that's, I'm not throwing that out there as a decision, but it's a possibility. That it would be, on a limited basis, but to allow access by everyone of whatever ability, in some degree. That'll be one of the topics that gets looked at and discussed.
Well, the thing about Wat Mile Head is has such rich history, and how to, impart that to people so they can understand what an amazing place it really is. And I don't know how you do that. I'll live in the house and tell them all about it.
Karen has her hand up.
And how to give equal story to the Los Irish as well. and
Yes,
so
well,
not
it's
have
so
it
true.
all
There's
be
such
about
an-
the
yeah.
house and the settlement there, so.
Yes, and that, like the kitchen area was the original cabin. And then the other parts were built on. And it's just it's a funky old thing. But that's how people lived. And it's an outhouse for many years. Sorry.
You're muted, Tanya.
I got that one. So we have a question online. Are we ready to take another question?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes.
Karen, you're up.
It says much a comment as a question. When I'm thinking about the house and when I think about that time 30 some years ago when I went to buy garlic from Becky, I remember just standing there and thinking, oh my God, what it would be like to live somewhere like this. And then, thinking about noticing the house was old then, that, people have lived there for a while. And I think there's some value to the public being able, to a person to be able to go to a place like that and see a house and maybe even, see how, just to get a sense of, in this day and age, it's hard to imagine living somewhere like that, especially all by, away from everyone else. A lot of people don't have that sense of remoteness. It's hard to imagine it, but having a house there, that I think it has some psychological value for the visitor. And so I just wanted to make a case for, and like Nancy, I think that it's possible to restore something that's old, and I think it has great value. So I just want to make a case for that.
Thank you.
Tanya, I want to say something. So we had I don't know who to look at. We had a land bank meeting on Friday, this past Friday, our monthly meeting, and we had the opportunity to have some tribal people come, and we had a 2.5-hour panel discussion with them. They shared a lot of their knowledge and feelings and expectations. And so I really encourage everybody to go look up that recording and watch that panel discussion, because what I took away and what I'm responding to just in this moment tonight is that cabin was here a long time and a lot of people have lived in it, but there were other people before the cabin. And so I'm just saying, if we need to look broadly, and that panel discussion has made me look at this particular property quite a bit differently and thinking more broadly about it. That's all I'm going to say. So, but I would encourage you to tell your friends to go watch that. That was a profound discussion for me, those 2.5 hours, and nothing was resolved. It just showed how vast and complicated it was, but it was very productive. So it'll help put this property in a little more context, I think, in terms of looking at the challenges of everything.
And is even the potential of moving the house even being looked at or considered? You can take it in parts and put it back together. If Jeremy moved with you. But in any case, it is something I think shouldn't just be scratched off as a no-go.
Any other questions here? It's supposed to burn it down. Well, the history is, of course, hundreds of years of Native American camping there and, living. But there's also the white people came. And so it's all part of the history of what's there. So I guess it's just a matter of what's really important and what people really, I think it's all important. Yeah. Not that anything is less or more, it's just, that particular place it's very sacred, and it's very important to think about all those things. Of course, I love it in a personal way. But yeah, and thank you for everything that you have done down there and preserving and looking at it. I'm so glad the land bank has it.
When will the land bank hear about the rankings for the grants? Was it just this year's cycle?
Yeah, we've already heard about the rankings. We did quite well. So those funding sources are available to us. And so we just now heard about the budget coming out of Olympia for the ALEA program, and we're definitely there. And we knew we were in good shape on the Salmon Recovery Grant. So those monies are available to us. The issue is going to be, it's either or. If we accept those funds, that means we're keeping the property. If we are thinking that it should be transferred to BLM at some point, that it's a decision we're gonna have to make in the next probably, I don't know, 6 months, maybe a year at the most. So it's just something that we're gonna have to talk through.
And if you were to sell it, what impact that might have on the new, what do we call it, the new ballot REIT type, never quite know what to call the renewal. We call it the renewal of the REIT.
Yeah.
And, there's a chance that that becomes a negative for certainly the Lopez community.
Yeah, that's certainly true. The reauthorization, we're aware of that, and I think at this point we're really mostly interested in how the community feels about this, because the original plan was to convey it to BLM, and then there have been some issues, and so we've wanted to hold off on that. That's why we went out and secured the additional funding that we did, because we wanted to make sure if we were going to hang on to the property, at least we could recover some of those costs. But we're going to need a long community conversation on this.
This is Nancy again, McCoy. I prefer local ownership. I think then the people that it is most valuable to have more control over what happens and its use, its fate.
And that was one of my concerns. BLM and public ownership through that haven't bothered me in the past till, how do I put this delicately? The last administration sort of opened my eyes to the vulnerability of what might happen to federal lands. I guess it would be an option. I would prefer local ownership as well to control sort of its status and its operations. The other concern I have is traffic on the road. The road really can't take it. And being the immediate neighbor, heavy traffic would be really detrimental to the quality of our peace and quiet there. I definitely support people who are unable to walk in to come in at times, but to open it up to summertime traffic would be a nightmare. That's my comment.
And being part of a national monument would bring traffic.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've been a monitor for 30 years for the BLM. And the traffic, since it's become a monument on that peninsula, is astounding.
So we've got a couple of questions online. Are you guys ready to take some online, or I can't see everyone in the room,
One
unfortunately.
more question here, Breton. Oh, you can go back and forth, everybody's looking, we can't. Okay.
My question was also about BLM, and if it were sold, what that would look like in terms of change in management, or if you know what that would look like.
We have a good idea.
Yeah, from the other, yeah.
Yeah, that's the other part of the equation. We really need to have a good dialogue with BLM to find out where they are and what they have to say about it before making any decisions. Certainly they're better able to handle certain things than we are, and we're better able to handle other things than they are. So it's we just need to talk this through.
Steve, I think you're up. Online Steve, maybe there's a Steve in the room, I don't know.
Steve Snowden, you're muted.
Okay, I would just want to put my opinion in also that given that one of our major political parties keeps revisiting the idea of selling off federal land to balance the budget, to remove the deficit, whatever you want to look at, unless you can get an ironclad guarantee that the BLM will never ever be able to sell the property, then I think would be a bad idea to transfer the land to them. You know, all it takes is one big swing in the elections and we're screwed. That's just want to add my opinion on that one.
Well, thank you. Tim, did you have a comment or a question?
I did. I was wondering if you could speak for a second on how an easement might play into either of the two options. Is it a possibility for either option?
A conservation easement?
Yes.
So I think that the question, if we're going the route of accepting the funds from the state, then there's kind of that they would have a de facto easement on the property that we own through a deed of right. So that would really restrict what we could do with the property in terms of selling it off or doing whatever with it. If we were to convey it to BLM, we could retain an easement. It's possible we could construct it in such a way that it would still give us the value that we need. If we put a conservation easement on the property, which eliminated all of the development units, that's the price that BLM would pay us. So it'd be significantly reduced from what we've paid going in. Frankly, I think we'd be better off financially if we were going to pursue that option, not to convey it to BLM and just take the state grants.
We have a question here from Tom Cowan.
Well, actually, this is a really healthy conversation about the Watmow addition. I had some questions that had nothing to do with that. And I don't want to interrupt that conversation, but if there's going to be an opportunity to have other questions outside of the Watmow edition, I'd like to speak to that, but I don't want to interrupt this conversation.
I guess for the Watmow, the price of it, given other properties and the big increase in property value, if 50% or more can be in, or 50% in grants, possibly more, like 60% potentially, that it seems like an awfully good deal to keep it within land bank ownership. And what would it displace? Meaning if BLM got fair market value for it, what would land bank potentially be able to do that you can't do already?
I'm not sure, was there a question in there, Tracy?
It was a comment. My opinion is, given we may just look, 5 years from now, we may look back and just say, this was an incredible price to pay for that land. I think we may already feel that now.
Tom,
Well,
I think you might be up.
I'll just add, Tracy, that in my experience, it's rare that when you purchase properties for conservation to have people come back at you 5 years later and say, man, you really got ripped off. That was a terrible deal. That really never happens.
Right. And so I would think that if you're going to make a decision in 6 months, it's way too close to the next ballot election and on the land bank.
Any other questions or comments about Watmow edition? Ideas for names?
No, gosh.
Becky said earlier about Chadwick Hill, calling it Merck's Mountain. Because Chadwick actually owned homestead the Watmow side, and Merck had what is now called Chadwick side.
So Merck drained the swamp. Isn't that right, Nancy? Merck drained the swamp.
I'm not
Got
sure.
rid of the wetlands.
There were cucumbers in the marsh.
Yeah, and had a cow. had cow or, milk cow, then he would sell that butter at Richardson's store to trade for his groceries. It's a different kind of life.
Yeah.
But of course, that's long.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting place.
Yeah, the story of isolation is significant.
Well, having lived on a farm in North Dakota, I know all about lots of space all around. Not to mention wonderful neighbors.
If there was a Coast Salish name that we could pronounce or that could be decided by the tribes, that could be very, very appropriate at this.
Well, wasn't there an Indian princess and it was similar to Watmel? And that's how that name came about. Yeah, I think so.
That's actually a good question. I don't know what her name Watmouth.
And Nancy would know.
Not necessarily. But I'll make something up.
I think we've done that for Kellett.
Well, Watmel doesn't sound very native.
So Tom, did you defer for a later time, or did you have a question earlier that you'd like to ask? We still have a few more minutes.
Well, if this conversation, okay,
You're good, Tom.
I always have to start off by saying, I'm on the board of the San Juan Preservation Trust, but I'm not speaking for the trust. I'm gonna do this. I want to compliment the Land Bank Commission for having these community conversations. I think they're really important. And the more that you can get out there with the community, the better off it is. But thank you for doing that on each of the islands. I have a few questions, but the main question is, I understand that, and I know that the renewal of the real estate excise tax expires in 2026. And preliminary conversations that I'm aware of, were that likely time to go for renewal to the citizens of the San Juan County would be in the fall of 2024. And my question is has the commission undertaken those discussions, and have you made any conclusions as to where you'd like that to fall?
Krista, you were part of the conversation about that, weren't you? I was, and we've had a number of conversations about it, and I can speak for the commission in terms of how those discussions have been going. We are looking, I would say we're looking at the fall of 2024. The May meeting, we're hoping to have a discussion with the county people, because there's a number of things, initiatives that may show up on that same ballot, and I think everyone wants to have a conversation about who's going to be asking for what and what thoughts and strategies. So we have strong feelings about doing it in 2024, and we're hoping to convey those to the county next month. I guess that's what I would say. What would you say, Lincoln?
Are you asking, I'm sorry, are you asking me, Krista?
Just asking, yeah, if you would add anything to that, or is that, am I heading in the right direction on that?
Yeah, no, well, I can't speak for the commission. But I would say that there's a lot of advantage to going out in the fall of 2024. So I hope we can have a constructive discussion about that.
I have a question in that vein. If it were to go to ballot and to be turned down, what becomes of the land bank and what becomes of the properties?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a bit of an unknown. We do have stewardship funds, which would enable us to steward properties into the future. However, there's no doubt that a lot of our activities would have to be pretty radically curtailed. So certainly no more acquisition would happen after that, and we'd have to really figure out on some of these properties, what that looks like, what kind of public access we really would be able to have on some of them. We've got other properties, for example, on Orcas Island, a big farm that's leased to a private owner. Is that something that the land bank could really continue to carry going forward? There are lots of questions. None of them, there are no really great answers to those. I would say if the reauthorization fails, probably there will be an attempt to come back around and try and do it again, maybe at a lower rate. But I don't know. There are a lot of unknowns.
Our renewal is, I think we actually terminate in 2026. I think that's right. So one of our rationales for going out next year is that if in the off chance we were to not be renewed, we would have another kick at the can within our period, without having to launch Plan B. So that's one of the good reasons for going out next year. And we set aside, I think now it's $500,000 a year we've been putting into the stewardship savings account, basically, that's currently generating the $5 million, I think, that we have in reserve. So that's been our goal, is to set that money aside every year in preparation for that. So it's our rainy day fund that doesn't become part of the yearly budget process. So not being successful this year doesn't mean we have to start doing everything. We still have another year or two to try again.
Also, which, even though we've passed the affordable REIT tax, the 0.5%, that goes away if the land bank does not succeed. And so hopefully that partnership and the people that really want to support the affordable housing can really help back up passing the land bank as well.
Did you have another question, Tom?
Well, I'll just say I really encourage you to concentrate on trying to set this up for the fall of 2024. It's a presidential election. It's a good time to be going for the renewal. So I'm saying that my other had nothing to do with renewal. I just was wondering if you especially the two of you, Peggy, and of course you new again.
New old.
But my other question is, have you strategized on priorities for Lopez Island in terms of future conservation?
We've had conversations. I think we can say that, because I don't think I would share necessarily the conversations that Peggy and I have had, and Amanda, just in terms of things we heard about and looked at or been alerted to. So I think that goes on kind of all the time. But we love to hear from people.
That's what I was gonna say. I mean, it's really great. for people
I'll
to
put
let
that
us
out
know.
right there. I'm hoping that part of that conversation involves Jack Shear's Point, which I think is probably the most important acquisition that could be made on Lopez.
Where?
Jack Shear's Point.
Right next to Shark Reef.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The sign. So Tom,
the Stein?
the sign property.
Yeah, Stein. I'm sorry, that's what I probably, the current owner is Stein, has been an owner for many, many years.
But it was called Jack Shear.
Yeah, that's what when I came here, that's what it was always called.
The other property I'm going to, which I'm forgetting the family name right now, I've been racking my brain, is immediately west of Point Colville. And it goes all the way around. Beck. Yeah, the Beck property. Yeah, it goes all the way around into McCarter Bay.
Yeah, they haven't been, I was a caretaker for that property for a number of years, and due to poor health, they haven't been up here much the last few years.
But they've just conveyed more property through the San Juan Preservation Trust.
Conveyed it as an easement or actually conveyed ownership?
No, I think it's just an easement. I'm not familiar with it, if it's all of their property or if it's part of it. This has just happened in the last month or two.
Yeah, it's a huge property.
I think they have 90 acres.
Yeah. Well, I have had conversations with, I mean, even way back when I was on the bank. we started talking with Stein, with Leonard Stein, but he still comes out.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, thanks, yeah.
I mean, I would like to say, you know, if people have ideas, they should let us know.
My old neighbor in Portland would come up to Long Island with his connection, Bender, and Long Island, and that connection, we knew those people in Portland. That would be an amazing acquisition. I think they only have 2 houses there and small and
Yeah, there's no doubt that there are a number of great possibilities on Lopez, and we continue to look at those. We do have a couple of things that we're working on. So we'll keep at it.
Well, we've got 4 minutes left. Are there any last comments or ideas that haven't been brought up yet?
I have a question. It's pretty random, but I'm curious as what the decision process is for allowing hunting opportunity on land bank land. I know that on Lopez Hill is allowed, but I know that it's not possible on other places. And I previously had a permission to hunt on some marshland on the south end, which has been purchased by the land bank. And I'm just wondering, what is this decision process as far as what is huntable, what's not?
Sure. I guess Tanya, you're probably looking at me. So when we first leased Lopez Hill, like allowing hunting was very new to us. Before, we didn't allow hunting as just part of, limiting our public access, like to low impact activities. Since it existed on Lopez Hill, we know there are overabundant deer. We decided to continue that use, but limiting the time frame. And so since then, we have expanded hunting to Mount Grant, and we're on deer hunting on Mount Grant. And then also kind of opened the possibility for turtleback as well, because while it's hard to know how many deer people are actually hunting, we see some ecological benefit from a reduction in deer population. So I recently had an inquiry about hunting rabbits, but it was for Lopez Hill, and I was like, I really hope we don't have rabbits on Lopez Hill. And so I'm not really sure what our process would be for continuing considering other types of hunting, like rabbits or geese. I think it would probably lean towards species that are overabundant and causing some environmental harm.
But go ahead, Lincoln.
I would encourage anyone who's interested in hunting to tell the commission about it and make a proposal, because if we don't know, if there are areas which people have been hunting and we're not aware of that, and we've acquired a property, then we certainly want to know about that history. And if there's some potential, we'll want to take it into consideration.
And some of it comes out in scoping meetings, when now we develop the interim management plan and in preparing the final plan, part of the public process will be getting together and asking the community whether they want done, where they want it, and hunting is usually included on there. And it's kind of getting a barometer interest. So there are a couple different ways that you can get your input in if there's something you'd like to see happen, because hunting does happen on some of our preserves. And the community has mixed feelings, but there's some historic practice allows. Well, because they manage, that's Bureau of Land Management, not
So
conservation.
you would suggest making interest known as far as
Definitely.
Yeah, I think, so, yeah, I think, it doesn't mean, we have to know about it to discuss it, so that's the
Right.
first step. Yeah.
And I'll say, I apologize, I can't see your face and I don't know your name, but you can send the email directly to me, to TanyaW@sjclandbank.org. I'm part of the staff on the website. You can find the email that way or call. But often anything that comes through on my email gets forwarded to the appropriate, whether it's stewards, commission. When we have some meetings, often I'm the recipient of public comment. And it gets forwarded into a folder that everyone gets a chance to look at. So writing is always best, only because it's something that it can be passed around and it's historical versus a phone call. So if you're willing to put something together, whether it's physical mail or email, that would be wonderful.
Thank you, that answers my question.
Well, it's 8:00, wait, gotta take the glass, 8:01. Thanks for coming. I hope everyone enjoys the cookies on Lopez.
Thank you, Lincoln. Thanks,
Thank you,
Tanya.
guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.